Good evening, residents of Everett, Washington. In accordance with the Governor's Healthy Washington guidelines and in an effort to protect city employees and members of the public from transmission of COVID-19, the City Council is conducting our weekly council meeting remotely. We are prepared to reopen the council chambers to public meetings when public health considerations indicate it is safe to do so. There are several ways in which you can engage with the council and participate in our meetings. To watch or participate in our remote meetings, you may watch council meetings live on Comcast Channel 21 or Frontier Channel 29. You may watch live online at www.everettwa.gov/citycouncil, where you may also watch past meetings. You may also call in to listen to the live meeting at any point by dialing 425-616-3920, conference ID 724-887-726#. If you wish to provide public comment at a future meeting, you'll need to obtain the weekly conference ID. It is available on the City Council page of the city website, on the published agenda printed weekly in the local newspaper, or by contacting the City Council office. Please note that we do not allow comments on any kind of campaigning, whether for or against ballot measures or candidates running for office. We also do not accept comments focused on personal matters that are unrelated to city business. Outside of our meetings, members of the public are always welcome to contact council members or provide comments or concerns on any matter via email at council@everettwa.gov or by calling the City Council office at 425-257-8703. I'd like to remind anyone waiting to provide public comment tonight to please mute your microphone by pressing *6 until called upon. I would like to call upon Councilmember Roberts to read the land acknowledgement.
Brenda, I do not have that in front of me, so let me try to.
I'm going to find that this morning with Deb Williams out. I think we may have had a miscommunication on who was available to do that. So I'll read it this week, and then we'll next week get it assigned to you.
Okay, thanks. Certainly happy to do so. I just don't have it in front of me.
Okay, my apologies. The City Council wishes to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Stohoe people, and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society. Thank you. With that, I'd like to call to order the Everett City Council meeting for September 8, 2021. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Mayor Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Toohey.
Excused.
Councilmember Roberts.
Here.
Councilmember Bader.
Here.
Councilmember Vogeli.
Here.
Councilmember Moore.
He may be running late. I think he was planning to be here, but if not, he's excused.
Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
President Stonecipher.
Here. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of September 1st, 2021?
Councilmember Bader, so moves.
Robert,
second. Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Bader.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogeli.
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy.
Yes. Or excuse me,
President
that's
Stonecipher.
that's an abstain. I wasn't in attendance last week.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Thank you. And now, good evening, Mayor Franklin.
Good evening, Council President, Council members. No comments, just a big welcome back to school to all the kiddos in Everett and Mukilteo school districts here in the city of Everett. It's great to see kids back masked up at school, and so asked all their drivers to watch out for kids on their way to and from school now, and good to see. No further comments tonight.
Thank you. We will move on to council comments and liaison reports, starting with Councilmember Roberts.
Thank you, President Stone Cipher. Just two quick items. First, the Sound Transit Board members, Summers, Nicholas Smith, and also joined by Mayor Franklin, had a chance to meet with Congressman Larson today and just give him an update on the realignment process. And also I had the opportunity to tour the Hoff Foundation facilities on Broadway and was very impressed. These are facilities that provide special services for women who are homeless and who need special services, and they just do a fabulous job. And I'll be sending on a note email to Julie Willie, but I was just very impressed, and they're really well connected with the Everett Gospel Mission to help provide services that are really important for special services for women that provide safety for them and personal services. So great opportunity. That's all I have.
Thank you. And next we have Councilmember Bader.
Thank you, Council President Stone Cipher. 3 items here. First of all, from Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management, we are working our way through the regional housing strategy. One thing that's came up, I think, that we want to especially note is the thinking of the desire on the part of, I think, some other jurisdictions that there should be some level of accountability or what should I say, requirements to meet when it comes to growth. And I think that's well intentioned, but I think obviously, a challenge we have in Everett is even though we planned for it and created many of the mechanisms for achieving it, we've struggled, mostly I think because of the economy to achieve our growth targets. So I'm sure the mayor and York are, aware of this and on top of that, but just something I think we want to be paying attention to in terms of any mandates for growth or requirements that might affect our ability to compete for Puget Sound Regional Council dollars. So that's one thing I wanted to alert everyone about. Second, yesterday, the Parks Board met. A lot of exciting stuff going on. First of all, tonight, obviously, you will see, I think, Rotary Park and Howarth Park sports courts in front of us. Also coming up, just Parks is just really busy. Doyle Park playground work is going on, should start soon. Lowell Riverfront off-leash area is coming up. Kind of a shift from Lowell Park over to the Lowell Riverfront area. Madison Morgan Park work is slated to move forward here, I think, soon. And Silver Lake Trail as well. We've heard some of that. Edgewater Park renovation. They're just beginning the process of that, I think, meeting with the community out there. And then Eclipse Mill Park, that park in the riverfront development there. Things are about to get started, I think, in requests for qualifications to provide design and construction moving forward on that. So, and also in the Parks Board, we heard more about the PROS plan, kind of focused on the tree canopy in Everett. Right now, I think if I recall the numbers right in their presentation, about 25% of Everett has tree canopy. I think there will probably be some discussion about what should be the goal for that. The consultants mentioned 40%, though I didn't get the chance to ask about why 40% was a good number. So I think there'll probably be some discussion about that ultimately I think will come to council to talk about that. Finally, I wanted to say, first of all, to the mayor and her administration, thanks for the monthly council digest about the encampment response team that you've got together now. So I think that's a really great thing, and grateful for all the work they've been doing. A lot of hard work, I know, there. In light of what we've heard recently in the past few weeks occurring along Wetmore and Rockefeller, just north of Everett Avenue, and also with the potential for asking other areas of the city to consider locations with pallet shelters and wanting to provide them, or at least I think we should, with some reassurance that potential negative impacts will be mitigated. If there's another council member that would support this, I'd like to ask the city attorney to draft some language to our current no sit, no lie ordinance that would allow it to be used in other discrete areas that are disproportionately impacted by the provision of social services. And I know there's a lot of things involved with that, and and there'll be some discussion as well. But I'd like to ask that if there's another council member that would be willing to support that effort, ask the city attorney to bring us back something in regards to that.
Council President, this is Councilmember Murphy, and I would support Councilmember Bader's suggestion to work with the city attorney. I think it's important that we take all steps necessary to ensure that our neighborhoods are protected, and at least getting the language in place so that council down the road could take action in a particular area, for example, where it made sense, I think is smart planning and good work to get behind us. So I would certainly support that request as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Council President. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so you, Council Member Bader and Council Member Murphy, can work with the city attorney, and when you're ready to bring forward something, please let me know and we will get it on the agenda. Next, we go to Council Member Vogeli.
Hi, everybody. I'm a little, let's see. I don't know. Paul said that he had gone somewhere on Broadway today, and I feel like I missed an appointment and I should have been with him, but I'm not sure. I was looking at my calendar, and so I'm sorry if I missed out on that. And considering the no sit, no lie, it's interesting that we want to, that you want to increase that, because a lot of people have noticed that since the no sit, no lie went into effect on Smith Avenue, while things have gotten better there, everybody has moved on to somewhere else. So if we just keep doing that, then I guess we could just push them out to Marysville and Arlington and not really help anybody. And I don't have a liaison report for anything, but I'm looking forward to hearing all sorts of wonderful things tonight.
Yeah, Council President Stonecipher, if I could just interject.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogeli, you did not miss an appointment. So you're good there. The Hoff Foundation had asked to meet with all the council members, and for obvious reasons, we could not have a meeting with all council members. And so I think they're trying to, or Deb and others are trying to schedule so that we can all visit. And I certainly encourage everyone to go visit their center. But anyway, I just wanted you to be aware. No, you did not miss an appointment.
Thank you. Something was scheduled, but I don't see it on the calendar. So thank you very much for letting me.
You're good.
For letting me know. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. And I don't see Councilmember Moore. Have you arrived at the meeting yet? Do you have comments? Okay, we'll move on to Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Council President. A couple of quick items tonight. First, a liaison report in my role as liaison to the police department. As you'll recall, several months ago, the council did authorize staff to move forward with an RFP and a procurement process to issue an award for the police assessment consulting project. And I just wanted to give you all an update on that. 6 firms submitted applications to work on that project, and the administration did narrow that down to 3 in the month of August. Those interviews were concluded, and now the police chief and Chief Templeman and the administration are recommending a particular firm be hired, and the hope is to get that firm on board here by the end of September. I have requested with Chief Templeman and the staff that Council President Stonecipher and I would have the opportunity to at least have a phone conference or a Zoom meeting with representatives of that firm prior to issuing an award or a notice of award of final contract. So certainly we'll keep you posted, but the goal is to have that firm on board hopefully by the end of the month, and then the scoping and the other work, scheduling out the process, will start in October. And at that point, I expect there to be a fair bit of commitment of time and resources from the police department staff. So more to come on that. Second, sorry I was not able to attend the meeting last week and give my support for the reading of the lands resolution on a weekly basis. Certainly glad to have supported that and see that being recognized. But separate and apart from that, but on a similar vein, I would like to suggest that we as a council get back to conducting a Pledge of Allegiance or a flag salute at the beginning of our council meetings on a week-to-week basis. We used to do that when we met in person, and I always appreciated that commitment and patriotic recognition of our country and our flag and those who've served our country. And so since we've gone into virtual mode, I know a couple times I have conducted the flag salute just kind of on an ad hoc basis, but I would like that to become a regular part of our agenda. And so if there is support from another council member, I'd like to work with our council president and our staff, hopefully to get something up and running next week where we would have our United States flag displayed on the screen, and a council member, perhaps the same council member that is reading the lands acknowledgement, could also then in turn read the Pledge of Allegiance or flag salute. And so if there's another council member that would be willing to support me in that effort to organize that logistically, I'd be looking for that support at this time.
And Council President Stonecipher, I would support that. And I just note that as a town with a Navy base, and also in honor of our veterans, particularly at this being a somewhat difficult time, I just think I appreciate Councilmember Murphy's bringing that forward and would support that action.
Thank you, and I will work with administration that seems like a reasonable thing to begin to do, since it looks like we're going to be in remote mode for quite a while longer, and I'll work with administration to see how we can make that happen.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Councilmember Roberts. That's all I have for this evening.
Thank you, and for my reports, I have a few things. First of all, I want to really remind our community that vaccination against COVID-19 is really the way to stay safe. Our hospital in our community, Providence Hospital in North Everett here, is beyond capacity. Their ICU beds are full. They've had to add overflow beds. They've canceled any elective surgery and non-essential services now for the second week in a row. And this is because they are seeing an absolute influx of unvaccinated people that have been falling ill with COVID-19. The Delta variant is a serious variant. Please get vaccinated and encourage others you know to get their vaccine. And at the same time, everyone who is vaccinated, please stay safe to avoid needing any hospital services. The hospital is really in a crisis mode at this point. So that's one thing. I also noted in the mayor, thank you for your briefing memo for September. Appreciate all that information. And I noticed that the budget briefing will be happening on September 29th. It's the last meeting of the month, and it's a night meeting. And so I'm just kind of curious, what is the plan for how we will be discussing the ARP funds that we will be having? Is that going to roll into the budget process? Will that be a separate process?
That will
and
be
I know we've.
Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt, Council President. It will be a separate process. That the ARP is not rolled into the budget. I think we have the goal will be to present our kind of overarching strategies for ARP to council around the same timing. You know, we'll be working through that at the same time as you all working through the budget, but it is separate from the budget, so it's not being presented together.
Great, thank you. That sounds like a good plan. I'm just noting that we've, kind of tapped into some of those funds already, and I wanted to make sure that we had time for that policy level discussion about how we should be allocating those for use. So that sounds like a great way to do it. And then finally, I just wanted to remind my colleagues and our residents that we will be moving to the Zoom platform for our council meetings next week. And I know there's been some information out in our community just to remind people how to tap into that. If, as a council member, you haven't had a conversation with anyone yet about how you will be accessing that meeting, starting next week, they do have a plan for contacting you over the next week to make sure that you know exactly how to get onto our meeting. That's all I have. Is there anything to report from administration?
No administrative report tonight, Council President Stonecipher. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move to City Attorney. Mr. Hall, what do you have for us this evening?
Don't have anything to report, but we are requesting an executive session to discuss a labor contract pursuant to RCW 423144B. We're requesting 10 minutes with no announcement to follow.
Thank you. Nicole Weber, have we received any comments from the community for public comment this evening?
Yes, we have 2 people tonight to provide comment on item 18, home occupation, and item 17, transit. And then we also received written comment from Dylan Sluder from the Association of King and Snohomish County Master Builders in support of the Housing Action Plan, which I believe you've all received and I'll send to the clerk. So first we have Dave Koenig, who's going to comment on home occupation. So Dave, go ahead and unmute yourself and please state your name and the city you reside in for the record, please.
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yes.
Again, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, my address is 1302 Madrona in Everett, Washington. My comments are tonight are based on my experience. I have administered and been responsible for code enforcement of home occupation. And so I've seen different experiences. As I said in my written comments, I think it's important to encourage home occupation, especially ones that fit into the neighborhood. And I gave some examples, which I won't go over, that were in the written comments dated August 24th. But my points I want to make quickly are that retail sales, which rely on customer visits to be successful, should not be allowed in residences. The parking as proposed could have a demand of up to 8 parking stalls per home occupation. And those break down 2 for the home, 2 for employees, 2 for business vehicles, and 2 for people who have come to do it. So there could be a total of 8 parking demand, but not that provided. I recommend that a parking study be done, especially with a housing strategy that's moving forward that's actually calling for reducing parking. When the city council enacts legislation, citizens expect the city to enforce those codes. And so I think whatever action you take, you should consider how that code is going to be enforced. I do not believe there's a need to allow on-site employees. Remote jobs are the norm these days, and a lot of people are doing. And on the street I live, I would say half the people on the street work out of their homes, and there is no impact on the neighborhood whatsoever. And there is no need for business vehicles. The code calls for 2 business vehicles, up to 2 business vehicles. With UPS, FedEx, etc., there is ways for people to have things delivered, and then they can go out and use those facilities for sending things out. There's not a need for business vehicles on the site. Anyway, that's my comments tonight. I wanted to be brief since I gave you written comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Next, we have Joe Kunstler, who's providing comment on item 17, transit. Go ahead and press *6, Joe, and unmute yourself.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes,
Hello.
we can.
All right, great, thanks. Great. First, I want to start out on a point of personal privilege. I want to thank both Mayor Cassie Franklin and Council President Stonecipher for your kind comments tonight, urging everyone to get vaccinated. This is a very, very serious virus, and my parents' hometown, I had to literally zoom in and ask my council, ask the council to over there to, speak up on COVID. And I'm sorry that I'm tongue-tied, but I'm supposed to be reading from my computer into my cell phone about your transit development plan, so I'd like to get on that. But thank you so much again for sticking up for public health, because we are nearing a point where we're going to have to lock down again or have crisis standards of care, and I don't think either is acceptable. But with that, let's get to the transit development plan. I actually read this year's Everett Transit Development Plan. As pages 5 and 6, I want to ensure the time frame around merging with community transit and a November 22 ballot measure. We can expect Linwood Link to be completed by mid-July 2024, probably sooner that year. Then there's also the matter of the community transit Swift Blue Line and Everett Transit Route 70 agreement. I have said for years that Route 70 lacks trips to connect folks from the multimodal terminal to the Seaway Transit Center, which can then connect folks to Everett and the Swift Green Line, not to mention the future flight in many places around Gainesfield. In fact, I'm asking that Everett ask to allow the road Route 70 community transit. I don't see the logic of Everett providing this commuter service, this regional service, when Everett wants to provide neighborhood service and is doing an absolutely rad job with your battery electric buses. I absolutely love you guys are doing this. They're photogenic, they're fun to ride. I'm really excited about the Gilligs, the electric Gilligs, when they get here. You're giving everybody in the entire Puget Sound hope of better, cleaner transit with these investments. So I want to give you some positive feedback on that. I also hope that Everett Transit is able to prioritize coverage a bit over frequency. If you're a transit geek, you know what I mean. I really want to again thank the Council President Stonecipher and Mayor Franklin for your kind words on COVID-19. We need to get after this virus. Thank you for your time, and I will watch the rest of the meeting on Everett channel. Thanks.
Thank you both. That's all the comment we have tonight.
Very good, thank you. Am I lost in my agenda here? Okay, we will move on to our consent agenda. We have a large consent agenda. We have 13 items. Do I hear a motion to approve the 13 items on our consent agenda this evening?
Councilmember Roberts moves the consent agenda items 1 through 13.
Murphy, second.
We have a motion and a second to approve our consent agenda. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogeli,
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Now we'll move to our proposed action items. Are all first readings this evening, so I will first read all of them. These are items that will come on a future agenda. Number 1 is item 14, Council Bill 2109-29, first reading. Adopt a proposed ordinance granting a 5-year extension for telecommunications franchise to Astound Broadband LLC, doing business as Wave. Third and final reading will be on September 22nd. Item 15 is Council Bill 2109-30, first reading. Adopt a proposed ordinance creating a special improvement project entitled Haworth Park Sport Court Renovation, Fund 354, Program 071, to accumulate all costs for the project. Third and final reading will be on September 22nd. And item 16 is Council Bill 2109-31, first reading. Adopt a proposed ordinance creating a special improvement project entitled Rotary Park Renovation, Fund 354, Program 072 to accumulate all costs for the project, with the third and final reading also appearing on our September 22nd agenda. Do we have any questions on any of the three proposed action items from council members? If so, please unmute yourself and make yourself known. Hearing none, we will move on to our public hearing. Item 17 is a public hearing. I will read the item and open the public hearing. This is a public hearing presenting the 2021 to 2026 Everett Transit Development Plan and 2020 Annual Report. I believe Melinda Adams is here this evening to present this. Is that correct?
Yes, good evening. Melinda Adams, Transportation Services Manager, Transportation Services. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you all see the screen? Yes? Okay,
Yes.
Great. Thank you. The TDP is a state mandated annual report, and information from this report is used by the legislature in their deliberations on the state of public transportation. It lists the activities and accomplishments in the previous year and projects plans for the following 6. Generally, it provides guidance for future work plans. Although there are budgetary elements, it is not a budget document. Tonight's presentation is a summary of the more detailed document in transit. The TDP has been reviewed by the Transportation Advisory Committee as required by TDP legislation, and the final step is the public hearing this evening. No action is required by council other than to hold this public hearing. So we begin with the activities in 2020, where you can see our Everett transit arrivals, text messaging, the number of texts and phone calls received. It's interesting to note that we did have a drop during the COVID crisis of 44% in 2019 on text messages received, and a drop of 58% in calls received from 2019. Our commute trip reduction program continued on, and staff got very creative in 2020, presenting our local employers in the community with both virtual trainings and quarterly newsletters in place of the on-site training during the pandemic. Disadvantaged business enterprises. We paid 11.3% to minorities and women-owned businesses on grant-related projects. This success was due largely in part to outside construction projects completed during the summer months of 2020. Our Everett Station Park and Ride expansion was completed and provided an additional 90+ parking spaces to the south end of the Swift terminus. New bike lockers were also distributed throughout the main parking areas. For equipment and facilities, Everett Transit received 2 new electric buses in 2020 funded from a competitive federal grant. These are brand new models of the Proterra ZX5 Plus. Operations has seen an increased efficiency over the prior models. In our paratransit fleet, we accepted 18 new paratransit vans, and during the year received approximately $4.5 million in COVID relief funding that was applied to transit staff salaries and benefits. Additionally, Everett Station preventive maintenance projects included parking lot paving and restriping, water heating system updates, replacement of glass with new upgraded wire mesh in our shelters, which helps to avoid vandalism, leak and lighting repairs. For Next Generation Orca, which is our new fare payment system coming in 2022, the preliminary design review process was completed and final design initiated. Mobile data terminals were installed on the new paratransit fleet. Fixed route operations, you can see that during our COVID crisis, the number of passenger trips decreased 56% from 2019, and expenditures reflected a 3% decrease. We saw a sharp decrease in fuel consumption due to the increase in the number of electric buses on the road, in addition to decreased service due to COVID. Paratransit operations also suffered a decrease of 53% and a 24% decrease in expenditures. Our paratransit customers were significantly impacted during this time. And with COVID-19 restrictions in place, we required one seat and one ride for their safety. So although the efficiency went down, the cost was still there.
Council President, I wonder, Melinda, if there were supposed to be slides on those last two things that didn't advance from the facilities or equipment slide.
It didn't. Okay. Or do you need me to go back to Paul or Councilmember Bader? I apologize.
Melinda, I'm going to try to share my screen real quick and kick you out and try to kick me back again. I want to see if it's just frozen.
I apologize. It's advancing on my screen.
Okay, please try again to share your screen.
Okay. Everything was going so well.
And it would, I believe, 2 slides prior that was missed.
Slides prior. Let's try this again. Back, can you see it now?
Hang tight. It's still we're still trying to receive your signal. I only have a black screen from you.
Okay. I see at the top it shows give control or stop presenting.
No, you're okay. So now I have received the signal. I'm trying to put it live real quick.
Thank you, Pipa.
Jonathan, can you try to trigger because it's not letting me go?
Yep, I'm trying it now. I think it might be doing the same thing. I'm getting a failed to execute send live command.
Yep.
Are you able to try to present it? Do you have the slides as well?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to download the slide. Hang tight.
Dead air is terrible air.
I am going to take over the screen real quick so it's not black. Hang tight.
Thank you.
And then, Melinda, if I may, because I think it's only PDF that I see, can you send me that slide, the PowerPoint itself, and I will control it for you. But on the council folder, they're all PDFs.
Okay, I'm sorry. How do I get this to you?
You can drop it in the chat, but in the meantime, I am going to also try that PDF. I never received a copy of that, so I am unable to.
Okay,
And I'm still looking for it on the.
Should I end the show and send
Yes,
you that?
please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
And dropping it into the chat, I do by copying the presentation.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh no, you're okay. I am going to try to share this screen instead now and see if I can.
Okay, but could she also email you the PowerPoint? That might be.
So unfortunately, this is so far the best I can do for now, if that works for everybody. Is that okay? Can everybody see it?
I can see it.
And I will go to, I believe it's this slide.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I apologize for that. Thank you, Pipa, for helping out. So you'll advance the slides for me as we go?
That is correct.
Okay, so let me get back to my notes on fixed route operations. So what we were talking about here was the decrease in passenger trips from 2019, and noting that there was a sharp decrease as well in fuel consumed, contributing to the fact of the number of electric buses we have on the road, in addition to decreased service. Next slide, please. For our paratransit operations, there was a 53% decrease from 2019, and our expenditures reflected a 24% decrease. Important to point out that our paratransit service customers were significantly impacted during COVID-19. With COVID restrictions, we required one seat and one ride for safety. Therefore, efficiency did go down and costs were still there. Next slide, please. For Everett Station operations, we had an 8% decrease from 2019 and a 7% increase in expenditures for 2019. Everett Station continues to have a high cost of operation that unfortunately is not covered by rent alone. Next slide, please. For our budget actuals, this is a fairly self-explanatory slide. Our revenues were at 28.9 million, expenditures at 28.2, with a capital reserve transfer of 5.5 million. Capital revenues at 8.1 million and expenditures at 3.5. Looking forward to our projects from 2021 to 2026, we will place inductive chargers at College Station, Seaway Transit Center, Everett Station, Eclipse Mill Park, and the Transit Operations Base. 9 additional electric buses produced by Gillig were funded through a regional CMAQ funding, CMAQ standing for Congestion Mitigation Air Quality. Our onboard systems include destination, passenger counting, stop announcement, and GPS coordinates. We also will look towards obtaining 6 paratransit vans. Next slide, please. Additional projects and service. Restoration of Sunday service was restored in March of 2021. System-wide service increase of 18% will take effect this October in 2021. 90% of the fixed route service has been restored from pre-pandemic levels with that service increase. This increase required hiring 10 additional drivers. Currently, paratransit service is at 65% of pre-pandemic levels. The introduction of the Colby Connector is a tentative service plan pending confirmation of revenues that we're watching very closely. It will connect North Everett to downtown via Colby Avenue, offering direct service to both Providence Hospital campuses, Pacific and Colby. Route 6 will serve the Eclipse Mill Park at the riverfront to College Station via West Marine View Drive. Paratransit service during this time is anticipated to grow by 1%. Additional fixed route service adjustments for schedule integrity and delivery optimization. And much of our service growth or decline through this time will be dependent on voter-approved changes to increase revenue. Next slide, please. For our projects and facilities at Everett Station, we have a number listed here. Everett Station will focus on several security and safety updates over the next several years, building on the work that has already been completed. Interior and exterior lighting updates will help with visibility and safety, along with upgrading of security cameras, and will continue through 2024. Additionally, we will have bus shelter repairs and rehab, building access management system, an elevator rehabilitation project at the station, security camera replacements to increase to higher definition, exterior lighting updates. Also an interior LED light project and upgrading of a low voltage fire alarm control panel. Next slide, thank you. Next generation ORCA system installation will begin in 2022. The next generation ORCA system will bring major updates such as instant access to the ORCA purse and pay by phone. Integration of inductive charging at the integration of the inductive charging at the transit operations base will happen in 2023 and allow for faster charging of electric buses, leading to additional fuel cost savings and route efficiencies. At the top of this slide, you see there, we also talked about our security fencing and CCTV replacement. So the next slide is our financial picture graph. As you can see from the graph, the beginning balance is a substitute for the amount of money in the undesignated reserve. When the line dips down, it means we need to dip into the reserve to sustain service or make a major capital purchase. In general, Everett Transit is sustainable for the next 6 years. This is made possible by an infusion of unanticipated federal support and a slow restoration of service, still not yet to pre-pandemic levels. And with that, we're on our final slide. Comments from the public will be accepted through September 16th, 2021, and can be sent directly to me at the email address included. And with that, if there are any questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Melinda, for that presentation. And we will go down the roll to see if there are any questions or comments from our council members, starting with Councilmember Roberts.
Well, Melinda, thank you for the presentation. I do not have any questions. I just appreciate the continued move to electrify the fleet and to restore services. And we obviously have some hard decisions in front of us, but I just appreciate the work that Everett Transit is doing to try to provide the services to our community. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Bader.
Thank you, Council President. Good presentation, Melinda. Exciting stuff that's going on with Everett Transit. One thing I did want to ask about, and maybe not necessarily for discussion now, but given the size of the deficit for the operating of Everett Station, I wonder or want to suggest to the administration that we have maybe some additional information or discussion about that. I mean, that's really tough and hard to swallow. I know it's challenging, but I wonder if we need some additional discussion on that as well. But other than that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Vogeli.
Hello, hi Melinda.
Hi. Thank you for saying.
I love to. And now I might be freezing. Okay. I somehow missed what Councilmember Bader wants to talk more about, and can you repeat that?
Certainly. He was referencing the shortfall in operating Everett Station. We have spaces for lease there, but the operations from the inception of the building have continually created a deficit there. It costs more than we can bring in.
Okay, thank you. And then my own question is, if by some act of Congress, and that's in quotations, the city's able to go fare free, which I know we've talked about, and apparently it's totally not possible, but if it were possible, I don't expect you to have an exact number, but how much might we save by not putting the Orca hardware into the buses? I mean, because that's going to be in 2022, which, oh my gosh, is coming right up.
That's an excellent question, and it looks like Tom has opened up to maybe address that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Melinda. Councilmember Vogeli, I'd be happy to give you a more detailed answer on this one. There is a lot of costs that have already gone into the development of this project, which are not recoverable. So all we would be able to do is save the cost of the equipment, and it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's not in the millions of dollars. And it's certainly less than the amount of money we would take in fare in a typical year.
Thank you. I'll keep asking the question because I want fare free and reliable, fast service. So, and get people out of their cars, even if they are electric. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Council President. Melinda, thank you very much for the update. Appreciate your presentation. The one question I had in mind has to do with the service levels, and I'm certainly glad to hear that the fixed route service levels have at least partially gotten back to pre-pandemic levels. I think you said back up to 90%. So I'm a little curious as to what could be done to further enhance the service commitment for the fixed route. And then separately, I guess this is maybe a second question, but it's sort of related on the paratransit. I think you said we're back to about 65% on paratransit. So I'm wondering if that trend line is moving up, and are we still on the 1-to-1 relationship with one rider to one paratransit vehicle / driver? So sort of two questions in there about the service levels. Thanks.
Sure. I can directly address for the paratransit. We are not currently doing the 1-to-1. We have been able to begin to go back to some type of normalcy. We're just not quite up there in the ridership yet. Tom, do you want to step in on the fixed route?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember. Regarding the service increases, we have been adding service. Our service change in October will add service in areas that, for instance, Route 29, which is our second most productive route on the east side of the city, will go from a service every 45 minutes to generally every 30 minutes. And this is an area that has wanted more service for a long time, and we believe will actually need it. We're adding service to the Riverfront Business Park to get people down there to the businesses, Amazon and In-Farm, the new business down there. So we're focusing our service increases on the essential worker and looking at the times and the places that the service goes with that in mind for the most part. So we didn't just simply return all the service that we had to take away earlier. We're replacing service a little more strategically than that. We do have plans for some service increase in March, presuming that the sales tax trend, which looks pretty good right now, remains solid. So that's the direction we're taking.
Great, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no additional questions. We did already hear from the person who was waiting to speak in the public hearing.
Okay.
And since there is no action needed on this, actually, I think we need to take a vote on closing the public hearing. Do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
Murphy moves to close the public hearing.
Roberts, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogeli,
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. And since there's no action needed on this, we can move on next to item 18. Again, thank you, Melinda, for being here to give this report to us this evening. I'll read item 18 and open the public hearing. Council Bill 2108-28, third and final reading, adopt the proposed ordinance amending Title 19 zoning regarding home occupation development regulations, amending Ordinance 3774-20. And I think we probably have, do I have someone here from administration for any further presentation?
Council President Stonecipher, this is Dan Ernest. We do not have a presentation this evening.
Thank you. So on this item, we will be taking public comment in this public hearing, and it is our recommendation that we then extend the public hearing to a later date when this will come back for a action. So let's see, do we have anyone else here that would like to speak on the home occupation development regulations? Did we get anyone coming in, Nicole? No. So let's go down the roll and see if there are any further questions or comments from the council members, and that will start with Council Member Roberts.
Thanks, President Stonecipher. I guess I have a question. When would it be a good time to ask for some amendment language? And I don't know, I know we're continuing the public hearing, so we're not closing the public hearing. I'm just wondering what would be the best way to do that? So that's the question I have.
I think I can.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
I
thought it was for me. I'm sorry. I know we are already working on an amendment. So we understood that you had asked for one previously, so we will be working on an amendment specifically for the retail portion of the ordinance.
Yeah, I know I haven't been very specific about what that would be, but also as I look at the item that we'll have next, or at least the item that we have under briefing, which is rethink housing, and I look at this ordinance and think about how these might work together or not. I guess to me there would be maybe several things to consider. One is that this might be an interim ordinance so that we can track it as we go with higher densities. For instance, if we're talking about increasing densities on a relatively wide scale throughout the city, then the question of how home occupations and some of these issues might exist in that higher density is I think, an important issue to track. I know, so to me, there's a limit. There's one, the limitation of retail, two, the parking, three, the employees, and then the question is, what is the best structure? Because I would like to move forward on an ordinance, but I think as written, I would have some concerns in all of those areas. So I'm just trying to understand what the best way to bring some amendments forward so that when it does come back, we could have that discussion and dispose of the amendments and then hopefully of the ordinance. And so maybe that's a question more to the council president or to legal. I'm not sure. Maybe I should put something in writing that is more specific. That would be more helpful.
Well, I think it would be helpful to talk in this public meeting about some of those concerns and questions so that other council members and also so the public can hear what we're thinking about. They may have a notion to weigh in at a later date as well. So if you have concerns, if we can air them now in this public meeting, that would be wonderful. And then that will give administration some feedback in addition to what they've heard from us already.
Well, sure. So just in quick summary, then the limitation on retail, I did look at, and Dan, thank you for sending the email that at least touched upon what other communities are doing. I would be, speaking for me, would be interested in some kind of limitation on retail that has a fairly significant limitation that addresses some retail that is allowed consistent with the business that exists. In other words, and I'm taking this a bit arbitrary, but it would not exceed 30% of the gross revenue of that business. So, if I had a hair salon, I could sell products, but that wouldn't be my principal source of income or gross revenue for that business. So there would be a limitation. Number two would be, I really think the parking issue is something that needs to be looked at more carefully. So I would not be interested at this time in seeing additional parking because if we're looking at higher density, I think we need to look at that question in the context of a city that becomes more intense, and therefore the competition for space would also be more intense. And I think we need to look at that carefully, which is why I was thinking an interim ordinance might be a better approach so that we could move forward with home occupations, but also look at this as we move to rethink housing and to the comp plan. And then the last and related would be the same issue in a different form in terms of employees. So trying to put some limits on that, at least for now, until we have a chance to see how all of these pieces would fit together in terms of more intense housing and potential reclassification of uses that would take place in the comp plan. So those are the things that I would be interested in seeing adjusted in this ordinance. And that's where I think the interim designation makes more sense given the other things that are also moving pieces. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Next we go to Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Council President Stonecipher. I think I'm still looking for information on enforcement. I think one of our public commenters raised that issue as well. I just feel uncertain about how well we can enforce these regulations and would feel more comfortable moving forward if there was some more information we can get on practical enforcement and I think specifically the nuisance ordinance as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Councilmember Vogeli.
Thank you. Going back to like the rethink housing and possible density increases in any manner of residential areas. And, I personally don't think that retail is necessary in a home occupation. I think you may have heard that from a couple of us. but what about, you know, corner stores? And I guess that wouldn't be in the home occupation part of, you know, it's not what we're talking about, but it is what we're talking about. So, you know, just the other day, my son's like, man, I wish we lived somewhere where we could just walk to the store. I'm like, I know. And then being able to walk to the store means your car is either non-existent or at your home because you likely have one if you're walking to the store. So this thing about corner stores and the rethink all of everything comprehensive plan. And then I'm just curious, what would be an example of a job that would necessitate more than, you know, employees? You know, home daycares are already allowed, and that's usually, and they're in some other form of something. Hair, people that do hair typically just have their one stand. I'm just, who needs I just don't have that experience or understanding. So if I had an example of who would need an employee, that would be helpful. And if it's not retail, then, you know, if only retail would need an employee, does anybody have any ideas? That would be a cool answer, like right now, if somebody has an example that I could wrap my head around. Okay, then let's get rid of having any employees, which would then get rid of having the need for parking spaces.
Councilmember Vogeli, I'm not sure if I should answer now or not. Are you asking me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think it could be light manufacturing assembly. It could be a hair salon that had 2 chairs. It could be a lawyer who had a paralegal and an assistant. It could be an accountant that had, you know, so there's.
Thank you.
I could rattle off some more, but I think it's quite broad.
Okay, thank you. I just wasn't, all I can think of is hair salon. So I appreciate all of those examples, and that gives me an idea. And then I just thought beer store, beer making, cider making, lemonade. Okay, that is all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Council President. I missed the conversation last week, but did have an opportunity to look back at some of the comments. And I, like some of the other colleagues tonight, I have some real concerns with the retail being drafted into this proposed ordinance. And so I'm really concerned about the enforcement. I'm concerned about the unintended consequences that I think could come about as this is interpreted in different ways by various folks that might have home-based businesses and so forth. And when I think about zoning, I think about what is the reason for zoning? The reason for zoning is so that we have compatible land uses adjacent to each other, and so that we can, as a community, plan for orderly growth and change, and you know, talk about population densities and creating attractive, healthy and beautiful residential areas, for example. And so this one doesn't seem to advance those goals. And so I'm somewhat reluctant to move forward with this in its current form, and would agree with what's been said, essentially, that I think this needs some major rework in order, at least from my perspective, to be something that I could get behind, and look forward to seeing that revised language, but would really suggest that we take our time and be thoughtful about this so that we don't end up with unintended consequences. So I guess that's my feedback.
Thank you. And for my comments, I agree with what has been said. I would like to see us take a slower approach in, and as long as things are working well, maybe expand on that as we go forward. But I'm a lot of reluctance about the retail sales in particular. And I think that we have a lot of areas of our community that are zoned for retail sales, and would be nice if we had some of those businesses occupied so that we could have you know, some more walkability and merchantability in our commercial areas. So we are at this time where we need to either table this motion because it actually came on as the third and final reading. And if we table, then we would want to leave the public hearing open so that we can bring this forward at another time. Do I hear a motion to table this until administration brings forward a revision to this ordinance?
So Robert's here, I would move to table it. And in that motion, if there's a second, I would just speak to it very briefly.
Do I hear a second?
Councilmember Bader will second.
Thank you. I do think the discussion touched on several key issues. And there were certainly maybe others, but I'm certainly willing to work with administration. My interest isn't to kill this ordinance, quite the opposite, but I do think that there needs to be some revisions before it comes back, consistent with the discussion we've just had.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion to table? Just unmute yourself if you would like to address that. We have a motion to table. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogeli,
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes, and we will take no action on the public hearing closure because it will remain open then until a future date as well. Now we'll move on to our action item. Item 19, adopt the resolution requesting the governor, the Washington State Legislature, and State Attorney General assist in providing clarification of new law enforcement standards and requirements. Do I hear a motion?
Councilmember Bader so moves.
Murphy seconds.
We have a motion and a second. Let's go down the roll to see what questions and comments we have, starting with Councilmember Roberts.
I don't have any questions or comments. I appreciate the matter going forward, and clearly we need clarification on these issues. So I appreciate asking that question, and that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Council President Stonecipher. Just would reiterate that, I think 3 weeks ago now, we heard from our city attorney and police chief that there's great uncertainty around legislative changes and some sense that there were some unintended consequences now of the legislative changes. So I appreciate the city attorney drafting this and helping me bring this forward. And this is kind of the one thing I think we as a council can do. We we can't go to Olympia and make any changes ourselves. So or seek any or get it or clarify things ourselves. So appreciate everyone's consideration for this. Thank you.
Councilmember Vogeli.
I just want to reiterate that I am proud of our law enforcement and chief for figuring out a lot of the quirks of these bills, unlike some of the other jurisdictions in the state of Washington. So yeah, I suppose I'll go with sending a resolution to the Attorney General to get everybody on the same boat, so to speak. But I think that the legislation was well written. That is all.
Thank you. And Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Bader, I just want to thank you for bringing this forward, and also want to thank City Attorney Hall, who worked with Councilmember Bader and I to draft this. Thought it was well put together. We're already starting to see examples coming out of other neighboring communities here in Western Washington where criminal acts have not been followed up on by police because of an uncertainty or lack of clarity around whether or not the police had the right to act. I've seen several news articles just in the past couple days with examples of really some pretty serious crimes that have been getting committed and police being unable to move forward given their interpretation or lack of clarity. So again, I think this is one of those situations where the intentions were good, but the unintended consequences are really putting our police frontline people in a tough spot, and I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that was the intent or desire. So I'm happy to see this move forward, and would certainly commit to making phone calls or doing anything else within my power to help try to get our folks in Olympia to move forward with getting some sort of clarity. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And well, I will go along with this resolution for the state for the same reason that Councilmember Vogeli said that she will go along. I'd like us to be united in our concern about how these new laws are being impacting our community and our law enforcement agencies. I do think that it's unlikely to result in getting the result that we have stated in the resolution. But I also think that there is an opportunity for us to have a greater communication with our legislative body so that we can hear where they were at, what they were thinking when they approved some of these laws, and hopefully get some, again, better clarification straight from those people as well. I do have a little concern that our bringing this forward without having had that conversation with them first is going to feel like a little bit of the wrong method and timeline for how we would approach this issue. With that, Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogeli,
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Now we'll move on to our council briefing agenda. These items come before the City Council serving as a council committee of the whole and are likely to be scheduled at a future meeting. Item 20, adopt a resolution adopting the Rethink Housing Action Plan. Action on this is scheduled for September 15th. And I think we have Becky Abelman-McQuarrie here tonight. Is that correct, Becky?
Yes, is my camera showing?
I don't see it.
Can you hear me?
I can
hear you. Hear me, but you can. Well, I'm not sure why that is.
Do you have a
However, let me try to share my screen because I've definitely got a presentation to go through with you here.
And Pippa, you have a copy of the presentation. May not be needed.
So can you see my presentation, the first page?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I guess my camera's not gonna cooperate with me. Anyway, well, thank you, Council. I'm excited to be here tonight. This has been a long process. We've been talking about this for a couple of years. And not only that, we've really been able to complete this work as a result of the Commerce grant that we received last year. So we've really been aggressive about completing this action plan over the last about exactly a year. So I wanted to, again, put this project schedule, the final project schedule up here so that you can see what we've done over the summer. We've allowed a pretty significant public comment period, a couple of months. We have done a couple of community outreach activities, and I'll talk more in depth about those later. We've kept the Planning Commission updated. We've also briefed you, Council. It says the 8th, but it was, or that's tonight, yeah. We also briefed you back in June. We do have an action date here of September 15th, but I wanted to let Council know that as you can see, our deadline to Commerce is the 15th of October. So if we feel we need a little more information or we need to add some things, we do have a little bit of time to do that. And then I guess most importantly, The exciting part of this is that should you choose to approve the housing action plan, that the short-term actions would begin in January. And that's the exciting part of doing a plan like this. So a little bit of background about the project. We started out addressing, looking into housing needs, and you might recall we did that back in 2019 as part of our consolidated plan update. That was really an opportunity to take a look at what our community housing needs were. We acknowledged that there is an availability and an affordability crisis. Definitely, we're experiencing growth pressures, and those most noticeable in the homelessness that we see every day. We also know there's some new growth coming, and that we've identified really some displacement risk, and that'll become more apparent as we become a sound transit community. Some of this work was rethink zoning follow-up work. You might recall some of the single family zoning proposals that we had. Excuse me. It's a long presentation, so I've got to get myself going here. And then taking a look at the equitable opportunities that we need to afford in the housing arena. As I've mentioned, we got a grant from the State Department of Commerce. The mayor did appoint a housing committee who has really been our steering committee for this project. They have participated in many of our community chat sessions and outreach sessions and listened to community information sessions. So they've really been actively involved. I want to just remind the council that we've had 3 informational forums. One had to do with about the missing middle, which is not, we heard from former Governor Christine Gregoire, and she has done extensive research in King County, but it's certainly an issue all over the region and all over the country. We were able to bring in some national information about homeless solutions and issues. That was a good informational forum. And then finally, I hope that you had the opportunity really to hear about our how housing gets built. That was an interesting forum that was conducted by our Economic Development Director, Dan Ernesti, and we had a great panel that shared, some of the challenges and opportunities with developing housing here and everywhere, actually. Our chat sessions, I would say, were mediocrely successful. There were some where we had, a number of people, certainly people that did attend were very passionate about their opinions. And especially the last forums, and I'll share that a little bit about the input we received from that later on. And we certainly kept Planning Commission and City Council briefed. I was having trouble with my slide. Did it advance? Do we see the needs slide? Okay, great. Thank you. I just want to cover the needs again in the analysis that we've done, and then I'll talk about a few key points in that next slide. But really, there's affordability issues at all income levels. We know that it's very important to make sure that we're getting our high density housing and our mixed use, especially in the metro and and your high capacity transit corridors. We know that there's a great need for accessory dwelling units. Those serve a really good function here in our community. We know the housing for the homeless population is important. Looking at other housing types and really sustainable building practices as we move forward. Particularly, we saw the need for opportunities for housing for young families that want to move into the community and seniors that want to stay in the community. We think that there, and we did see evidence of this, that there should be opportunities for more homeownership and wealth building, especially in terms of lower income, underserved communities, communities of color. And again, as I mentioned, the displacement protections, especially as we move forward as a sound transit community. So some of the key findings from our research, and this is not new to you, we've talked about this, that current housing supply and production is not meeting demand. And we have seen, you know, some housing starts here in the community recently, more so than we have in the past, but still not keeping pace with what we know we need. Housing costs continue to rise, and that there is a lack of variety of housing types here in the community. I think what's really interesting and important too is to recognize that renters are proportionately experiencing more housing cost burdens, and we have more renters than we do homeowners. That means that they're paying more than 30% of their household income on housing costs, that's housing and utilities, and oftentimes more than 50%. So that's important to recognize that point. And that the displacement risk throughout the city, particularly along the transit corridors, are something that we're definitely going to have to pay attention to. This is something you'll see as we go through the sound transit planning, station planning, and rail planning. And it's certainly something that you will see in our comprehensive plan update, that the state has asked jurisdictions to make sure that they're paying attention to this. So although our chat sessions weren't greatly attended, we did have some opportunities to do some outreach to some specific organizations that maybe we haven't done in the past. So that was good. I think the chat sessions, we heard some of the similar things in terms of, you know, people wanting to make sure that there is preservation and consistency in our single family neighborhoods and not encroach in there unless housing can actually fit with what's there. But we did hear the other side of the coin on that, in that, you know, council has an opportunity to do some, I think what they call set aside, or that's inclusionary zoning. I'm not sure that the city is at the point where we need to do inclusionary zoning, and I'll touch on that in a couple of more slides. But particularly if we're going to look at surplus property, and we would surplus the property and put conditions on what would be there, just making sure that wherever we can provide some set aside for affordable housing in projects, so that number one, we don't get concentration of low income housing, and number two, having those mixed income housing projects really does provide opportunity. Those are opportunity areas. We had a chance to speak with the NAACP, and we believe there's follow-up work to that as we go through implementation. They were interested. They do have a housing committee there, so we've been working to try to reach out to them. We had a chance to talk to the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and that was interesting because, you know, from their perspective, they know they need more housing, and they certainly work on housing. They were interested in seeing if we can incorporate, how I guess the council passed an ordinance regarding workforce, and I'll be bringing back more information about that at your second meeting. And then definitely the Everett Rotary was very interested in that. Again, the final forum, How Housing Gets Built, was on August 26th. If you have not had a chance to take a look at that, please do. There's very good information from really experienced housing developers, both market rate and affordable housing, and really, the experience of producing housing from their perspective. And then again, we received written comment letters. I want to make sure we did receive a late one today from the master builders. I didn't know if council had received that as well. Great.
We did get that letter.
Great, thank you. So additionally, we had updated some documents today. Unfortunately, there were some documents that got uploaded that didn't reflect some of the changes that we had made. And these changes were some follow-up changes from some public comment that we received, and then also from the conversation that we had with you back in June. And so if I could cover those and then make sure that you did receive those pages that had the changes. But when we talked with you in June, you asked for a better link to the Climate Action Plan, and that was completely appropriate because there's definitely a lot of links to housing and the Climate Action Plan. So I appreciate that. The Housing Committee as well, and you did comment on this, adding some elements of how we might put some strategies around homeless housing. As I know you had a conversation with Julie Willie last month, and there's that large spectrum of housing. So I wanted to let you know that I am working with her on that, and we hope to get something out to you before your next meeting that would add some homeless housing language and discussion about some of those strategies. You suggested that we move the incentive study to the short-term action, which we have done. Also, updating the multifamily tax exempt expansion has been moved to the short-term action, which does make sense. We've added some language to the introduction section as the city starts to look at potential annexation areas and how housing is expanded or impacted our housing numbers if we were to annex. So some language has been added to that. And then you'd also asked about some community land trust information. I certainly didn't put it in the plan, and we can email this address out to you, but the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance has a really great website that explains what a community land trust is all about. And that is an ownership program, a low income ownership program. And then also we added some more language about equity. And I will say that that is something that we are always working to do, is to include more equity in our work, equity language, equity actions. And so we'll continue to do that. I'm not going to go through all of these, but because they're primarily what you've seen already, but just in case there's any public here, there are really areas of focus. We're increasing the housing variety, like the accessory dwelling units, looking at other housing types, making sure that we update the design requirements in the neighborhoods, and then making sure that we update our comprehensive plan to reflect how we would like the city to grow. the development on urban corridors, which is really important. It overlaps again both with the housing variety section and then again the next section, the TOD. But it's we need to make sure that we can adjust the zoning code to encourage more housing, more dense housing in those corridors, especially as it's better served by transit. Providing an economic study of those incentives, I think, is really important to know what, how much do we offer to get what we need. So that study, I think, will be very informative and helpful. And one of the other things that we did here in working with our consultants is that if we want people to use transit, we have definitely got to make sure that we've got the non-motorized transportation options through that urban corridor, within that urban corridor, bike lanes or bike paths and sidewalks, and making sure that we maintain and enhance the local environmental quality and streetscapes, because that's what really makes a good community, healthy community. Talking about transit-oriented communities, and the Housing Action Plan really is good timing as we work with Sound Transit to plan around these areas. And it appears that we have potential grant funds that can help us do some of this work moving forward, but really streamlining code requirements to facilitate the TOD development, but making sure that our code requirements do provide for, one, affordable housing, but two, all of the amenities that make a transit-oriented community really a community, a neighborhood, something that's complete. On the affordability side, as we've talked about that multifamily tax exemption, where can we expand that program? And then we do have a height incentive for affordable housing units in the metro area, but it just hasn't been used yet. So that'll go along with that study that says where we need to put that gauge to really incentivize affordable housing units. Promoting the community land trust as an owner-occupied housing. And then really long-term looking at how we can develop a strategy for funding for affordable housing. And that's clearly something that is important if we're going to see the needle move. I would say that the federal government has taken an interest in this recently under the new administration, and it's not just the funding side, but also looking at local government regulations and how it might exclude housing types or exclude people or exclude folks from getting housing just as a result of overburdensome regulations. And then identifying strategies and funding for housing in the homeless population. And displacement, I won't cover too much, but there's certainly, again, ways that we need to take a look at a program that would definitely mitigate displacement in a number of ways. I did show this slide before. These actions are in the short term, which is starting in January and going up maybe prior to the comp plan. They might intermix with our update. Midterm actions, which are 3 to 5 years, and I would say those would primarily be rolled into our comprehensive plan update. And most of the long-term and ongoing actions relate to monitoring. We think that the Alliance for Housing Affordability, or AHA, is going to be able to really help us do some detailed monitoring over the next several years. Again, I'm not going to read through all of these, but you've seen some of these short-term strategies that we would begin with. And again, it would take a couple of years and some resources to do that. Our medium actions, and of course our long-term actions. So the committee made some recommendations on the plan. They recommended approval. They did ask us again to add language regarding homeless housing strategies. And also they felt it was important that the resources are provided for the implementation of the plan. Planning Commission did support the approval of the Housing Action Plan. We took it to them last month. And so before you, the recommendation to the council is tonight to review the Rethink Housing Action Plan, give us any additional feedback. And if you're confident that you want to take action next week, we have prepared a draft resolution for you to consider next week. And I think that I've covered all of that, everything. It's a lot. So I'm here to answer your questions. Are you muted, President Stonecipher?
Yep, sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that. That was great. And we'll go down the road, see who has questions. And it starts with Councilmember Roberts.
Thanks, President Stonecipher. Becky and Yorick and group, I just really appreciate the work that you brought forward. There's a lot of really, really good work here. I am spending my time going through it, but I think I want to say, first of all, the focus areas that you've identified, I think are the right ones. I mean, I have been following this as it goes. So I do want to tip my hat to you and all involved who've brought this forward. I would say, first of all, I think just because of the volume of the material, I'm a little concerned about trying to move it on the 15th. But when I say that, I mean that give us a week or two more, not some months more. I think that there's a lot here, and I think we should have the chance to digest it and feel good about it. But I will tell you, in looking over, you know, the housing varieties, the development in urban corridors, the TOD, the affordability, the displacement, I think the focus areas have been good. I think you've tried to integrate this with the different pieces. So I just want to thank you for all that work. And I have a couple of quick questions. Maybe one is, as I looked at the parking issue, and I looked at it in particular today in regards to the home occupation, and that's where I came to look at this and thinking, with these kinds of increased densities, I think we just need to be thoughtful about how we integrate these pieces. Not that we shouldn't do integrate them, but we need to be thoughtful about how we do that. I really appreciate the design pieces. One of the questions I had to do with the development of the affordability strategy. And the language here says highlight current and potential sources of revenue. And I was wondering if you can share, I haven't had a chance to find it in the pages in more detail, but what was thought or what is the thinking in terms of sources of revenue? Because to me, that implies a revenue stream. And I wondered if there was something in particular or whether those are just general words referencing a more aggressive approach to find dollars wherever they may be. So I sort of read that in a couple of different ways.
Well, I could answer that with, it's definitely looking at, you know, where we can find more revenue opportunities, but one comes to mind that I can think of, and it may or may not be right for Everett now or at a later time, would be a housing levy. There was a discussion, I think, in the Hart report about a housing levy, but that's certainly another, that would be a consistent revenue stream that the city could take a look at some point. But I think it was more of an open-ended, broad strategy to see where we could find, you know, more opportunities for where that happens. And just another side note, certainly the Biden administration is looking to expand funding for affordable housing and expand the tax credit program. So, you know, we might see opportunities at least through this administration.
All right, thanks. And then I also really appreciated the integration of the short-term steps v. long-term steps so that we can make this work together with a comprehensive plan. So I won't go on here. I just hope that we'll have a little more time to review the material before we take a final action. So thanks very much for all the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Council President Stonecipher. Becky, yeah, and staff and the committee, just amazing work. What a huge body of work to put together and enormous effort. So thanks for all you did on this. I just wanted to highlight a few comments or questions that I had as we move forward. First one is in the short-term recommendations on, what was section here? Sorry. It is increasing housing variety. I'm very concerned about the idea that we'd remove the requirement for owner occupation for accessory dwelling units. I mean, as you pointed out, we're so rental oriented right now and not owner occupied that I'm really concerned about that we end up with going even more that way with landlords who aren't as invested in the community as those who live right there. So that's one concern I have. I wanted to voice that now. In the short-term recommendations on the development on urban corridors, I was just wondering, is there any concern that making it easier to develop housing on urban corridors might ultimately squeeze out retail? I see the Kmart site, and obviously it was to some extent a derelict vacant site anyway, so probably no loss there. But if we make it even easier to develop housing on what otherwise might be retail sites, is there any concern about squeezing out retail? Or am I misreading?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of the zoning along urban corridors is mixed use, and primarily I think that requires that the bottom floor is primarily retail or business oriented, but it does allow for, housing units above and behind. So that's a good comment, and I think something that we would want to pay attention to as well.
Okay, thanks. And it's almost a similar comment on the next section and short-term recommendations section on, what is it? Oh, sorry. Oh, TOD, I think concept was, I think it's well-intentioned to coordinate the long-term preservation of TOD sites, but do we have a risk stymieing development that might happen on those sites? Kind of the perfect being the enemy of the good. So just wanted to throw that out there. And then finally, in terms of short-term recommendations for protections for tenants to reduce displacement, again, a concern I have there that while well-intentioned, does it make developers and landlords gun-shy about increasing or even maintaining the rental supply, that they'd rather just not hassle with it? So I don't think any of the suggestions you have there are, ones that are, some of the more dramatic ones that I would really be concerned about. But I just want to plant that idea that we don't want to, we don't want to end up in a situation where we disincentivize developers or landlords and end up with the opposite result, with either more expensive rental or less rentals, or even, I guess, in general, just less housing available. So those are at least the initial blush of my concerns. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vogeli.
Thank you, Becky and everybody. I just want to, I'm going to pretend these are my words, and then I'll tell you whose they are. The time for subjective input is when zoning plans and design guidelines are written, which is what we're doing. After that, the vast majority of projects should be either approved or disapproved on the basis of compliance with those predetermined rules. This will significantly speed up the development of new housing and reduce the cost and risk premium associated with building homes. The Affordable City, and I'm not asking you to buy this book. Yes, I am, but I'm not getting paid to ask you to buy this book. Every single person on this call and out there in the city needs to probably take a look at this, because a lot of the questions that you're asking are in here, including about rental properties. And I'm curious if we might put, if now would be the time, or the housing action plan would be the place to put in a rental registry. And because I know that Bremerton has one. I know that we do not. And most of our people are living in rentals. And a lot of them are mediocre at best. Oh my gosh. It's disgusting, and we should not be coddling landlords. And there's a whole nother discussion about that, but there are ways for revenue in that, and also ways for people to be healthy in where they live. And also considering that it's like 10,000 hours to get a license for being a beauty esthetician, but you have to get absolutely no training to become a landlord. And it's where people live, work, dream, cook, eat, learn, sleep, all of the things. So it's a very important job being a landlord, and you need to take it seriously. And we can create more probability that we will have safe rental units, and then also affordable, and then also the ability to purchase down the line. Again, the Affordable City, and please talk to me about it, anybody. So it's amazing what we need to do with housing and all sorts of things. Also, this will also answer a bunch of your questions, and it will show you the beautiful, beautiful pictures of how missing middle housing can fit into any residential area. There is a yellow map on my wall. I have to be non-blurry so you can see my, shed, but 80% of our housing is single family. We could have so many awesome families walking together to the corner stores. Yeah, I know it's not all exactly about this housing action plan, but it's so important, and we all need to take it seriously and really create a diverse and wonderful city. We are ready for it. Are we? I don't know. Read up on this. Let's do the work.
Thank you. Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Council President Stonecipher. Becky, I also want to add my thanks for all your work, and in particular, your patience and commitment to sticking through it for the past couple of years. This has been a monumental effort, and I really appreciate all your hard work, as well as, of course, the Housing Action Plan Committee. That was a dozen folks who volunteered countless hundreds of hours, so thanks to them as well, and all the staff. Couple of things. I guess just in general, I just want to say that I really think this is important work. I think we all recognize that. When I first moved to Everett 30 years ago, Everett was known as a city that was a very affordable alternative to many of the cities in King County. And I'm not sure that we can necessarily say that today. Yes, it might be less expensive than Seattle or Bellevue or some of those cities, but when people think about affordable housing, I think they think much further out, much further north, much further east. And so the concern obviously is that not only for ourselves, but also for our kids and our grandkids. The work we're doing here is to try to set up a community that has more options, more affordable options across the spectrum. So I really appreciate this work and recognize how important it is. A couple of things I do wonder about, and I agree with Councilmember Roberts. I think there's over 200 pages that were provided. Some of this I know we've seen over the last few months, but some of it's new, and I know there were some revisions even today that I'm not sure we've seen yet. But I think we're going to need a little more time than just the next week to really make sure we're doing a good job of understanding and digesting all this. But in particular, a couple questions I did have or comments on the short-term action plans. The first one you had listed about the ADUs. And I know Councilmember Bader brought this up, and he and I may not agree on this. The understanding I had was that this plan suggests that there would be no owner occupancy requirement. And I think the reason, as I understand it, for that is that if you put an owner occupancy requirement on the ADU, it's going to dramatically limit the effectiveness of that particular solution, in that there just won't be nearly as many people that would qualify. So do I have that right here, that that's the recommendation, that we would encourage the ADUs but not require them to be owner occupied?
I think that it was one of the requirements that we want to explore further. In the state legislature earlier this year, there was the House and the Senate did pass legislation that would prohibit that requirement in local jurisdictions. However, the governor vetoed it. But I expect that it may come back, but that is certainly one of the requirements that we would want to look at and get feedback from the community about. Yes, you're correct.
Okay, well,
it does limit.
Yeah, I think the way it's being presented, and if we approve this, my understanding is what we're approving is that we would be encouraging the ADUs without an owner occupancy requirement. So I just want to be real clear about that. And I recognize there may be some disagreement on that point, but at least as it's currently stated, that's my understanding. The follow-up I would have to that is, at some earlier point in this process, I seem to recall there was discussion about allowing duplexes, potentially even in single-family zoned neighborhoods on corner lots. And is that a part of this? And candidly, I have not been through all 225 pages yet of this document, but what is the status of the duplex option in single family? And before you answer, let me say I am aware of duplexes in my neighborhood and in prior neighborhoods I've lived in where you cannot tell unless you look real closely that it's a duplex. It looks like a single family home, and if they're designed well, they can fit in very, very well with a single family neighborhood, and you can't even tell it's a duplex unless you look really close. So I would be curious about duplexes and how that fits into this current plan.
Yes, that's a recommendation. So the housing action plan doesn't change the code, but it recommends that we move forward with a code that would allow duplexes in single family zones. That was part of Rethink Zoning. There were some, I know there were some visual preferences surveys done as well to look at the design guidelines, but yes, that's the recommendation, is that we move forward with amendments to the zoning code that would open up duplexes in single family zoned areas. Okay,
and this may be a legal question or just a practical question, but just following up on that. So when we do take action, let's just say hypothetically in a couple weeks we take action to approve this plan, are we actually approving that change, or is this just providing guidance and direction to staff, and that subsequent change would actually be subject to a future action by the city council down the road?
Correct. It'll be, these are recommendations, and so we would actually have to go through the formal code amendment process that the council would have to approve. And the same with the ADUs. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, just two other quick items, I hope. And I do agree with Councilmember Bader on the displacement protections issue. While I recognize that that is something that we need to, prioritize, I guess I would want to understand exactly whose back that burden is being put on. So for example, if the displacement protections are unilaterally being put on the backs of the landlords, then that's not something that I would necessarily support. I think that if we're talking about some sort of protections that are put in place and enforced by the government, but are paid for by the government, or some future developer, for example, then that's something that I think could be looked at. But much like the moratorium on evictions over this past year and a half has placed a huge burden on some landlords, and maybe there were government dollars that subsequently came in some cases. I'm not sure that was unilaterally the case, or universally the case, I should say. So I'm concerned about the displacement protections and would like to better understand what it is that you're suggesting or recommending there. And so I don't know whether now is the right time to get that clarification, or maybe I need to just go through these documents a little more closely.
And I can provide some more information and detail too at the next meeting. Displacement isn't intended to burden the landlord or the tenant, but it's a strategy to make sure that things, there isn't a trauma around someone losing their home. There's programs and how you do that and how it's funded. And so I agree. It's not intended to fall on the burden of the landlord.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And then the last, I guess, question or comment is I did receive the Master Builders. I think we all got a copy of that Master Builders comment letter earlier this afternoon. And one of the concepts they recommended we do some more homework on would be this idea of form-based zoning concepts is what my note says. And I think they referenced that that's an innovative, newer, maybe cutting edge sort of zoning concept. And I have to confess, I don't really know how that works or what that is, but I'd certainly like to understand that. And maybe that's something that we could get a little bit of a briefing on from staff at the next meeting, or at least some sort of a synopsis of how that works. And I think that's about all I have as far as questions and comments. Thanks again, Becky. Great work.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have very many more questions. I haven't gotten through the entire packet of information or the report, and I agree with my colleagues that it would be nice to have some extra time to do that because there's a lot there. A couple things that I am interested in is I got to the section in on implementation, and there was a list of key implementation steps, and they're described as topic areas in the plan that will require further coordination and guidelines for detailed tasks. I'm wondering how you see those things coming forward, because they seem to be really key areas. For example, they call for parking study to think about minimum parking standards, which I think is interesting given the conversation we're having also about home occupation. And they do talk about a little bit about looking at our design guidelines. And I've often felt that a lot of our community's reluctance to greater density in single-family residential neighborhoods has really stemmed from the fact that there have been countless examples where our design guidelines did not serve us well in getting those buildings built, and they didn't fit into the community and didn't look great, and yet they were completely within the design guidelines that we have in place. So I'm just curious about when those pieces of work need to happen and how that fits into the implementation.
I'm looking at so we have the develop revision to the design guidelines to reduce conflicts with denser housing, and then expanding housing diversity. Are you talking specifically about those two and the timing of those two?
Well, I'm on page 50, starting on the bottom of page 55 of the report. There are several actions described in this section that are involved with implementing.
Yeah, so that's just sort of a description of all of the short, long, and medium term actions. Summary, and then when you go to the tables, it's really about the timing of when those occur.
See, I didn't get to that. I stopped at that page. This is why we need more time. Okay. I see. Got it. There's the medium and long term. Okay, well, let me look through the rest of the report, and if I have further questions about that, then I can ask at the next opportunity that we have to do that.
Okay.
So it sounds like we've gone through the council list. I think we could use some extra time, and given that your deadline is the middle of October, I'm assuming that we need to get this done in advance of that timeline. Is that correct?
Yeah, we would. The deadline to get this to Commerce is October 15th. So yeah, I think we have a couple of weeks to add into that for your comfort level in terms of the information. So you can let me know when you would like this to come back to you for action.
we have a weekly meeting about our council agenda, so maybe we can put this on that agenda, and when I meet with Lori and Deb and Nicole, we can determine which one it will fit on in terms of, I don't know what other things are being planned for those meetings coming up, but we'll look out a little bit to see if we can give ourselves at least another week or two to review the materials.
Sounds great.
Great. Thank you very much. We are, well, I'll just say, as noted at the start of the meeting, we have a executive session that we are going to recess into, and then it's expected to last 10 minutes, and we do not anticipate an announcement to be made. So we will recess at this point and come back in 10 minutes.